Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 3, Episode 25. The episode is entitled Facets. It aired June 12th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about the previous episode, Shakar?
No, it was perfect.
I quite enjoyed that episode. A definite Star Trek episode where we tell this big story of sweeping political reform with just a couple of sets and a handful of people.
Yes.
Very Star Trek.
Yes, and one of those sets looked like it was an abandoned quarry.
That's true. And we also had a cave.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, classic.
Yeah, and I do like the rural high-tech design aesthetic that the Bajoran seem to go for.
Yeah, where it looks really run down and ancient from the outside, but then on the inside, we've got electronics and technology working to keep everything going.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, don't forget Shakar's hair. It was perfect all the time.
I will reiterate my theory that that was a deliberate directing choice to keep him looking perfect as kind of this Superman character.
Yeah.
I did like that. I thought it was a nice little touch.
Yeah, it was a good episode.
It was also interesting because I think you got to see Kira in her natural environment.
That's true. Yeah, she slotted right back into old habits with no trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, let's talk about this episode.
Okay.
In the cold open, Nog is running a simulation where he's in a shuttle trying to escape some Cardassians, and there's a knock on the window and Jake is staring back at him through the front window of the shuttle, which is a very funny image. Nog is practicing to get into a 6-week academy preparatory program, and he still needs to improve his reaction time in order to qualify. Nog has gone back to wearing one of his ugly outfits. Did you see that?
Oh, I didn't
that
notice
stretched out mustard sweater over a green mock turtleneck. He's worn that before. This is not a good look. I thought he'd moved on to better clothes the last time we saw him when he was now officially an adult.
Well, he's going to college, so he's not going to be able to afford nice clothes.
And meanwhile, Jake has upgraded from pajamas to slightly better outfit of a red sweater and red pants. I mean, this actually looks like clothes instead of pajamas for a change with Jake.
Oh, thankfully.
Well, Nog is worried that if he doesn't get into this preparatory program, he'll never get into the academy, and he really wants to show the admissions committee how determined he is to become a cadet. They walk into the bar together as Jake says, Nog will make a great cadet, and Quark pokes his nose into the conversation for a few insults of Nog. He says Jake is smart enough to stay out of Starfleet, and why can't Nog be more like him and find more profitable opportunities outside of Starfleet? Nog says, Jake wants to be a writer. There's no profit in that, which seems right. But Quark says writing holosuite programs, especially the porn-based ones, are very profitable. Anyway, Nog is annoyed with Quark's distaste for his Starfleet plan, and Quark is annoyed that Nog wants anything to do with Starfleet. He sends Nog to find Rom to take over behind the bar because Lieutenant Dax has asked him to join the senior staff in the wardroom.
It does seem that Quark really won't let go of the fact that Nog wants to be something more than what the Ferengi have always been.
Yeah, he definitely is fixated on that, and it's always hard to know, is it something that he worries about for his nephew, or is he just worried that this somehow reflects badly on him and will affect his business?
Oh, on him.
Because he always seems quite selfish.
Yeah. Oh, 100% it's on him.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a defining character of Quark. He's worried about getting sanctioned and not being able to do business with other Ferengis.
Right.
Why would you care? I would say dealing with other Ferengis is probably the worst people you could ever do business with. You're on a station, you have your own bar, you can deal with dozens of other races. What does it matter? So yes, Quark is completely obsessed with how it looks to other people.
Maybe he could use this as marketing. You know, if Nog gets in, he could market himself as the only uncle of a Ferengi who's in Starfleet.
Right.
You know, he could use it as some advertising, but that's not the way he thinks. I mean, it was the same thing with Pell and the same thing with his mother. He's got to always follow the old ways. He just can't think outside of the box ever.
He's very narrow-minded in that respect.
Yeah, he is very narrow-minded.
At the end of the day, Quark is not really a very good businessman.
Yeah, I think we've covered that.
Yeah.
But back to the holosuite for a second. How did Jake just walk into Nog's holosuite? I mean, it was a funny image, but really, that shouldn't have been possible, right? If he opened the door, wouldn't he be out in space? I don't quite know how that works.
Well, I would expect Nog probably gave Jake his passcode to get into the holosuites, because they are friends.
Well, to get in, yeah, but I mean, once the thing is going, how do you just appear? Because on the Enterprise, you had to call for a door, right, to get the door to appear. So if somebody came in, they would come in through a door. So did he just come in through a door into space? Wouldn't he come in onto the shuttle? That's what I mean.
Okay, I have an answer for you there.
Okay.
The ones on the Federation starships,
yeah.
They're the really good ones. The ones Quark are using are the discount bad ones.
Okay. They're just the little sweets, yeah.
These are the ones you get when you go onto Space Amazon and sort by lowest price.
So maybe it's more like a video game than the holodeck on the Enterprise. That's what it was called.
Yeah. I would expect these to be significantly less functional.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Well, now everyone is gathered in the ward room, which is the party room, and Jadzia asks them all to be part of her zhian'tara, the Trill rite of closure, where joined Trills get a chance to actually meet their previous hosts. She says, if you don't mind, I'd like to borrow your bodies for a few hours, which makes everyone look at her confused. And we cue the theme song.
I think, first off, this is an interesting concept for an episode.
Oh, yeah.
There'll be more in over-analysis.
Oh, okay. So after the theme song, we're back to the wardroom, and Dax explains that in the zhian'tara, a telepathic Trill guardian will remove the memories of a previous host from her and imprint them onto one of the others. Then that person essentially becomes one of the hosts for the duration of the ritual. Quark is like, why would I hand my body over to some dead person?
At least he's being the practical one in this instance.
True. Dax says it's only for a few hours and you're conscious of what's going on around you and you can reassert yourself and regain control of your body at any time. Though Sisko says it's best to relax and let Jadzia interact with the previous host because that's kind of the point of the ritual. Julian asks about Joran, the murdering host that the Trill Symbiosis Commission tried to cover up in the Equilibrium episode.
Yep.
Sisko has volunteered to embody Joran with some security precautions. I think you would want to put Joran into someone small and less powerful. Like maybe this is what Lita, the Dabo woman, should have done. She's probably not trained in combat techniques, you know what I mean?
That's a really good point.
Though, I don't know, maybe she would be as a Dabo woman. Maybe she does know how to beat people off. Well, anyway, everyone but Quark agrees. He tells her to find someone else and he starts to leave, but then Jadzia grabs his ears and starts stroking them grossly, convincing him that they'll get closer through this ritual. So the Guardian arrives tomorrow, and they all leave except Sisko, who asks if Quark just agreed to embody one of the female hosts, and Dax says that yes, he did, and they both think that's funny.
Once again, Quark, easy pushover.
Well, yeah, and this is kind of stupid, because first, haha, isn't it funny that he's going to be in a woman's body or whatever, big deal. And then second, this really made me miss Next Gen, where we didn't deal with stuff pornographically all the time. This kind of thing would never have happened on Next Gen, but we just do it all the time on here with the Ferengi. And
you mean the way Jadzia basically gave him a to get him to do this?
Yeah, you can't say that.
You mean the way they're implying that to get Quark to do something, you only have to involve some sexual gratification?
Yeah, and it clearly, that's what you're supposed to think it is because of the way that he reacts to it.
Yeah.
And maybe the actor plays it up more than it is played up in the story. I don't know. But this is definitely some kind of sexual pleasure thing for him. And it's just really gross to me. And it's also gross to me that to imply that women would just do that automatically so that they could control him. I don't like that implication either. But a little more seriously, I feel like we don't ask enough questions. I'm not sure I would be so eager to do this without some more information and maybe even some personal stories about how this works. Like, maybe we could watch a video of people who had done it before, go on YouTube or something.
I have the feeling that the video for that would look like one of those HR training videos.
Yeah.
Why do you want to do the zhian'tara?
I just thought we didn't ask enough questions. And also, I don't like when you ask people to participate in something in front of everyone else because I just think that makes people agree when maybe they wouldn't otherwise. I guess you do this in this kind of a story because of speed. You just need to move it along and make it happen. But I wouldn't realistically, I guess I wouldn't handle it that way. Even as the person being asked to do it, I would use this time to ask more questions.
Yeah.
Rather than just be like, oh yeah, sure, okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Speaking personally, yes, I would have a lot of questions at this point.
So now Miles and Nog are in the holosuite, so Miles can run Nog through the stress reaction test, where he is the operations officer on duty in ops. I'm not sure why this test would take place on a simulated DS9, but Nog takes his station just as something seems to hit DS9. Nog's like, what was that? But Miles very calmly says, you tell me, and then Nog gets to work. So I was a little confused. Is Miles testing him to get into the preparatory program, or what is happening here?
Miles is testing him to get into the prep program.
Okay, well, fair enough. It was just the whole thing was foggy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm easily confused. So Sisko and Dax are greeting the Trill Guardian, who looks a little like a Trill Gargamel in his dull brown smock. This is not the first person I thought looked like Gargamel on this show.
It's true.
The guy tells Sisko that they've been trying to get Dax back to the home world for this ritual for some time, but she kept putting them off. He says the Symbiosis Commission decided to force the issue by sending him to her. Sisko is surprised by this, and Dax makes up some excuse about how she's just been too busy.
Yeah, because they like to keep those guys in the caves.
Yeah, they don't want to send them out into the world.
They might discover there's more to life than just looking after the symbionts.
Yeah, they might.
Because we know that the actual symbionts view all the unjoined Trill as just some kind of general cannon fodder for their usage.
Gosh. Apparently so, yes. So after the ad break, we start with Kira and the first host, Leela. We're standing in the dark around a flame with the Guardian reciting something in Trill, I guess, and a blue light passes from Jadzia through the Guardian into Kira, who then becomes Leela. And we are hamming it up here a bit as Leela, because she has some kind of peculiar accent and way of speaking. The Guardian asks some questions to make sure that everything worked, and then he leaves and lets them talk to each other. So during this ritual, Jadzia completely loses the memories of this host, and they're now only inside of Kira. Jadzia notices that Leela walks around with her hands behind her back, which is something that Jadzia does. Leela tells her she started doing that when she was a legislator. She was one of the first women council members and always gestured emphatically with her hands when she spoke. When she learned that her male colleagues were imitating her mockingly, she started keeping her hands behind her back. We don't get much else really from this scene before we jump to the next one with Miles as Tobin.
Yeah.
Jadzia tries to get him to stop chewing on his fingernails. Miles, too, talks a little funny, saying he's just nervous. Jadzia learns that she got her unique way of approaching problems from Tobin.
Interesting. Then
we go to Lita, who is doing gymnastics around the room and talking about her ability to concentrate. I don't know which host this was. I don't even think they said, and I don't know if it's important because we jump straight from her to Quark, who is Audred.
I think what they're just doing here is giving you a flavor of who these characters were, rather than any real in-depth exploration of who they are and really what they are.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's because the story that they were trying to get to was Curzon, really. Yeah. A little bit Duran, but mostly Curzon.
Right.
So Quark as Audred is brushing Dax's hair and talking about being the head of the Symbiosis Commission and becoming a mother and nursing her child. This makes Quark break through the ritual and ask how long this is going to go on. Dax says not long, and she won't tell anyone what happened.
Okay, something I thought was funny in this scene was she seemed very happy about motherhood, and yet when Dax has talked about how she's been a mother and a father, how basically she's been bad at them in the past.
Yeah.
So is this a real memory, or are these kind of rose-tinted memories that she's seeing?
Well, just because you were excited to be a mother doesn't mean you were good at it.
Right.
I mean, she also talks about being the head of the Symbiosis Commission. Maybe she was a total workaholic, and maybe she only paid attention to the baby when it was first born, and then after that, she didn't pay any attention to it. I mean, we don't really get a sense that she was a good or bad mother, just that she liked being a mother.
It was something to tick off her bucket list.
Exactly. So then it goes to Bashir as Tarias, who seems a little bit obnoxious, so probably a good choice for Bashir. Tarias' life was cut short by a shuttle accident, and not much at all happens in this conversation.
Yeah.
And then the Guardian comes in really quickly to take the memories back from Julian. I guess we didn't have much to say, and also, I guess his life was short.
I thought that kind of fitted with Julian because there was a sense of sort of irritated by what was happening, that he didn't get his chance.
Yeah.
So that attitude he was giving out, I thought worked for the backstory, that this guy was joined and then very quickly ended up basically getting killed.
Right.
So I could see why he might be irritable about the whole thing.
Sure. Well, now for the big one, Duran.
Oh.
They lock Sisko in a holding cell just as they do the ritual, so Duran comes to behind a force field, and dramatic music plays as Jadzia and Duran greet each other. So Odo and the Guardian leave them alone, and Duran is not nice.
Oh, 10 out of 10 for Avery Brooks on this. The way he says to Jadzia after the transfer, "Hello, Jadzia."
Yeah, it's very creepy.
That was wonderfully creepy. This was another example of him doing those character swaps and just embracing it.
Yeah, he creeps you out right away with the way he speaks, the way he looks at her. Everything is just all of a sudden really scary.
Right.
And also, he's so mean to her. I mean, he asks her if she thinks of him when she practices music.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, this is getting creepy. And she says, sometimes. And then he says, she's a pretty girl. And he looks her up and down. It's so creepy because you were just sharing a brain. I don't know. It's all creepy.
Yeah.
But he says that that's all she is, a pretty girl, and is nothing compared to the other hosts. We also have a funny accent going on here, the way that Sisko is speaking. They all take on some kind of an accent, which I thought was pretty funny. Well, anyway, he can't believe that he was considered a mistaken join, and she wasn't. He says her one hope is that his strength is inside of her, and he can show her how to use it if she just drops the force field. But she says, I don't think so. And then he starts hitting the force field with his hands and then banging his head against it. Dax yells for Benjamin to take back control because she's worried that he's going to get hurt. He says, I think that's enough of Duran for now. And like a complete idiot, Dax lowers the force field, allowing Duran to grab her by the throat and start strangling her. But Dax punches him a few times before the real Sisko eventually does come out. Although I was pretty sure that Duran was still going to come back in this episode. I was very surprised that that was the end of Duran.
Yeah, they deliberately made you think that.
Yeah, they definitely did, and it worked.
That was a complete red herring.
Yeah. But also, this is why you should have used somebody weaker than Sisko to be Duran, because that was dangerous just for a few seconds there.
Oh, right. I mean, I guess it was only the advantage that he didn't have any combat training, that Jadzia was able to subdue him so easily. And Sisko at the end says, basically, thanks for no broken bones.
Yeah.
That was a nice touch.
That was scary. I did think when I first watched this episode, I thought that's what the episode was going to be about, was how Duran got out. But it turned out to not be that big of a deal, except it was important what he said to her, where he was undermining her confidence in herself, right? That was kind of a theme of the whole episode.
Before we leave the scene, I do want to bring up the Sisko taking that part of the transfer of Duran. Now, I would be really worried about leftovers.
This is what I mean. We didn't ask enough questions.
I know it hasn't happened yet in the Star Trek timeline, but do you remember when Tuvok in Voyager did a mind meld with a character called Lon Sutter?
No.
Played brilliantly by Brad Dourif. And the mind meld left behind parts of the Lon Sutter character, that he was a murderer and a killer. And this got stuck in Tuvok's head. I was watching this thinking, could this happen to Sisko?
Yeah.
You could end up with Sisko having violent tendencies or pieces of Duran coming out.
Don't we remember even our own episodes? Do we remember Vantika and Dramatis Personae? Yeah. These things, they get into their heads, and it's not just something that goes away right away. I don't know. It just seems like we weren't careful enough.
Yeah.
I imagine they've done this many times in the past, and so it reassured them, oh, every single Trill has done this, and it's no big deal. But still, I would have asked more questions.
Yeah, because the other side of it is they've done these transfers. But have they done these transfers with Trill who've been mentally damaged murderers?
Yeah. No.
The whole point is they're trying to avoid that from happening in those people. So this is probably a completely new experience.
Yeah.
Plus, why didn't they give him a piano? If you wanted to calm him down, couldn't they at least give him a piano?
That's a good idea. Yeah, they should have put a piano into the cell and just said, here, play some music.
Then everybody could have appreciated his genius at composing.
Yeah. Don't be a murderer. Write a song.
That sounds like something Paul McCartney would write.
Don't be a murderer?
Yes.
Well, now we go to Quark's, and Quark is counting his money on the bar again, right out in the open, while Rom waits anxiously for Nog to finish his latest test in the holosuite. Rom pulls a box out from under the bar and says he had Garrick specially make a cadet's uniform for Nog, and it cost him 5 strips of latinum. Quark says that's a waste of money, and he seems very irritated by this whole thing. So now Sisko and Dax are discussing Duran. Sisko wonders if Dax put off the zhian'tara because she was worried she wouldn't measure up to the other hosts. She says maybe. She still wonders why Curzon washed her out of the initiate program. Duran has shaken her confidence here, as she used to think Curzon did it to make her try harder, but maybe he really did it because he didn't think she was good enough.
Yeah, Duran was being verbally abusive as well, because he calls her a pretender. Like, she's unworthy of the thing. He was really undermining her.
Yeah, and he's in her head.
Yeah.
He's back in there now. Well, Sisko says that she needs to ask Curzon when she sees him. But I'm very confused by why she needs to ask them anything, because why wouldn't she already have all these memories? I don't know. Sometimes this is foggy, how this all works. I guess maybe some of the memories are just not on the surface and then they come out in these situations.
That's a good point. If you had access to all those memories, maybe this is where the symbiont comes in. If it has the ability not to tell you everything, that it can shield you from certain things.
Yeah, I guess it could be that. Or I was thinking there are times where even though you lived something, you can't remember it. You can't remember everything, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's all this is. There's so much memory in each individual person that it's not all readily accessible.
Yeah.
And so it takes this to bring it out.
Right. I see what you mean.
Well, now it's time for Curzon and Odo, which is an interesting pairing. It weirdly results in Odo getting trill spots and his face and hair changing into something apparently more like Curzon. Dax and the Guardian are surprised to see this development as we go into a dramatic ad break. After the ad break, Curzon Odo turns up at Sisko's door. He's very jolly and gregarious, giving Sisko a big hug. Odo says he is both Curzon and Odo. The Guardian thinks the ritual worked differently with a changeling, and it's more like a joining.
Oh, wow.
Odo asks Sisko when Cassidy Yates is coming back. So Cassidy is the freighter captain that Jake fixed his dad up with, and she appeared briefly in the episode that will not be named. Just long enough to introduce her and for Sisko to find out that her brother played baseball. I mean, we've had like 2 scenes with her so far.
So this is the genesis of Tuvix as an idea.
Yeah, the joining of 2 characters into one new one. And the captain wants to kill this one too. That's funny. Well, anyway, when Odo starts telling stories that Sisko doesn't want Jake to hear, he takes him outside to head to Quark's, leaving Jake to do his homework. In Quark's, Odo grabs Quark by the ears and kisses his head, calling him a magnificent scoundrel and freaking him out a little bit. Jadzia joins them, and Odo changes his boring brown security outfit into kind of a smoking jacket-like purple smock. It's funny how many smocks there are in the future. I mean, nobody wears them now.
And once again, you're seeing the heavy use of purple.
Oh, very purple.
And if you notice, Morn hasn't moved from the same spot he was in earlier. I forgot to mention the first appearance of Morn.
Well, it's not easy for him to get around, so it would make sense. They just set him on a stool and leave him there.
The poor actor has to sit there for like 6 hours during filming.
Sweating, probably.
Yeah.
So after he changes his own outfit right in front of them, Odo says that he really loves being a changeling. Sisko says he needs to finish evaluating Nog's test results, so he leaves Odo and Jadzia alone. But when Jadzia tries to have a serious conversation, Odo sees a Ferengi that he wants to play Tongo with, and he runs off. Seems like he's being his usual irritating, selfish self, Curzon.
Yes. I did also like how Sisko made an excuse to basically get out of there.
Yeah.
See, even Sisko doesn't want to spend time with Curzon.
No. Yeah, he doesn't. So later, while Odo and Dax are playing Tongo, Nog is telling Rom that he failed the test and he doesn't know how it happened. He says his Starfleet career is over before it even started. Quark interrupts them saying Starfleet doesn't know what it's missing. He says Nog would have made a good officer, which is a very suspicious thing for him to be saying at this point.
Yeah, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, as he tells Nog there will always be a place for him at Quark's, Rom becomes suspicious of Quark's motives.
Yeah, Rom is not fooled by that. He knows his brother well enough.
So Quark kicks out the Tongo players as Odo collects his winnings. And then we go to the security office and Odo is drinking more. And finally, Jadzia asks him why he didn't object when she was reinstated into the initiate program.
If you notice, he's also drinking booze that had been confiscated.
Yeah.
So another little
Evidence.
hint at Curzon basically being completely immoral.
Yeah.
He's taking things out of evidence and using them for his own use.
And selfish. I mean, he's essentially ruined Odo at this point.
I think this scene is clearly demonstrating Curzon's complete lack of ethics.
Definitely. Well, he tells Jadzia that he felt sorry for her, which makes her feel bad about herself. He says, you wanted to join so badly, and you were so young and so lovely, a thing that he says multiple times.
Yeah.
From my experience of being a young woman working with old dudes, this happened to me all the time, and it's really irritating. Well, she's annoyed because her suspicions were right. He never thought she was good enough, and he doesn't respect her. She's worried that when they're rejoined, she'll have this doubt inside of her, and she won't respect herself. Odo says, well, good news then, because I'm staying in Odo. He says, we like what we've become, and neither of us wants to go back to the way things were. Dramatic ad break.
Oh dear, that's a problem. I don't get why Jadzia would put any faith in that. She's already a successful scientist. She is accomplished in her careers. And at the end of the day, she was chosen for joining in a process that's very selective.
Yeah.
So what does it matter that an old, reprobate, morally corrupt, ethically challenged old fart has to say about anything?
Well, it's a great question, certainly in reality, but it does make you wonder, was this the writer trying to tell us something?
I don't know. It's like getting criticized by Jeffrey Dahmer.
Well, there's not quite that bad. There's a lot of different ways to look at this. She could have looked at him as a father figure because he was quite old, and for some inexplicable reason, he was very well respected by the Symbiosis Commission. So maybe she was looking at it that way. She also may have just been still attached to his reputation, although I contend that that doesn't make any sense because he's been a part of her now for long enough that she should have known his own sense of an imposter syndrome, but somehow magically she didn't, which is a confusing thing. If it was like a father figure, then that is a thing where you're looking for that person to just give you their approval. And if that's really all that she was waiting for, okay. But at this point, it does seem a little silly. I still talk to people who, even past their 30s, they're still worried about what their parents think of them and what their parents say about them. They just can't let go of it. And it's just like, come on. I mean, they're from a whole different generation. Mm-hmm. They have a whole different way of looking at things. You forged your own path. You just got to move on and stop fighting with your parents and stop, trying to get their attention and their approval. It's like that thing we see on Chopped all the time of these people. I want to win this to show my parents I made the right decision. It's like, yikes, that's really tough that you're at this point in your life and your career and you're still waiting for that approval. But you could look at that here as something similar.
That's interesting. It's a thing I can't really relate to.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, I don't understand why it matters to them. You're making your own path.
Yeah.
Why do you care?
Yeah.
It does seem to matter a lot to some people, but I personally just don't really understand it. I've seen it and it holds people back.
Definitely. It absolutely holds people back.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the implication here is that this is holding her back, this need for his approval. She kind of paints it as an understanding, but it's really approval that she's waiting for from him. And because he's such a jerk, he doesn't give it to her.
Do you think it's because Dax has been so driven, basically got the A+ in everything that she's done, that it's so confusing that why didn't she get the A+?
Well, being the person who always got a bunch of A's, it would drive me crazy when I wouldn't get the A. And even when it was just for something stupid, I mean, it's just the type of person you are, I guess, that you feel like you need it. I wouldn't say that I was particularly pressured by my family members to get A's, but for some reason, I really felt the need to do it and the need for that achievement. Yeah.
Okay.
But I also wasn't waiting for my parents' approval. I've had people in my career, though, I guess, that I have wanted their approval, but usually I've been able to get it. So it's hard to relate to this because this guy is just such a jerk. They're painting this weird line with Curzon, right? Where you're supposed to think that he was somehow great in some way, but in so many ways on these personal levels, he's a terrible person. And he was awful to her. He was not a great friend in many ways to Cisco. And we're still going to talk about that some more, but it's a strange character they're trying to paint here. And now they've put him in Odo and they've made him really confusing. Well, after that big reveal, the Guardian is telling Jadzia and Cisco that he can't remove Curzon's memories from Odo if Odo doesn't cooperate. Jadzia will have to adjust to this, but she should be fine. I'm like, yeah, okay, that was easy. Cisco volunteers to talk to Curzon, but Jadzia isn't sure she wants Curzon back anyway, which I'm with her there. Cisco asks the Guardian to leave them alone, and he asks if she's intimidated by Curzon. She admits that she's always looked up to him and finds it hard to challenge his decisions. Cisco tells her that Curzon was his friend and confidant, but he was also manipulative, selfish, and arrogant, and most people let him get away with it because he was so charming. Cisco tells her that sometimes he'd have to stand up to Curzon and tell him he'd crossed the line, and then he'd back off because he knew he was wrong. And he's wrong now. He's being selfish and he's manipulating her. He's like, so what are you going to do about it? It's hard to believe that he was so charming, right? They keep saying he was charming. I actually think he's much more of a bully than he is charming, where he just sort of pushes his way into something and forces his will onto others. That's not charm.
Right. In summary to this point, including what Cisco has just said, Curzon is morally and ethically challenged, is a toxic friend who has toxic characteristics. He's a coward who will retreat and run away when you call him out on his crap.
Yes.
And for some bizarre reason, he was 1, suitable as a host, and 2, Jadzia looks up to him.
Yeah.
This almost looks like a personality that if the Trill Commission could extract it, they'd probably want to extract it and leave it somewhere where they could forget about it.
Well, he's probably someone who could be a politician, where he is a little bit larger than life. That's that charming thing, where he can kind of put on a show and he can get his way because he can be very persuasive, whether that's through bullying or just talking someone to death until he changes their mind. That's true. Or just imposing his will on them.
We saw that in the bar, where he was being this larger-than-life character.
Exactly. And I think that sometimes people do mistakenly look up to people like that because they think that's a good thing from the outside. That, wow, look at how people are drawn to that guy. Look how confident and positive he is. But when you dig in, you realize, whoa, this guy is not nice. He is, just like you said, he's a toxic friend. I don't want to be like him. Jadzia hadn't seen that yet, which I don't get because it should have been inside her mind. But anyway... She still was looking up to that version of him that she saw from the outside, which was an image, clearly.
Oh, yeah.
Well, now Quark is walking through a dark hallway when Rom jumps out and grabs him. He's brandishing a memory stick, and he knows that Quark reconfigured the holosuite so Nog would fail the spatial orientation test.
Boom.
Quark says he did it for Nog's own good. He couldn't stand by and watch his nephew throw his life away. Rom says he had no right to interfere, and he's already told Commander Sisko what Quark did, so he will let Nog retake the test. And Quark is like, you did what? Rom says, you heard me.
And in response, Sisko is going to sternly do nothing to Quark.
Yeah, I mean, he's interfering in Starfleet business, but
yeah, this is
whatever.
Starfleet business.
I know. So Rom says, you heard me, and then he starts aggressively walking toward Quark, causing Quark to back up. Rom says, if you ever do anything to hurt Nog again, I'll burn the bar to the ground. He says his son's happiness is more important to him than anything, even Latinum. Remember that, brother. And he stomps off. And Quark just shakes his head.
Yeah, I think Quark might have just found the line that he can't cross with Rom.
Yeah, I really like this version of Rom. This is someone I can get behind.
Well, Rom's slowly been evolving over the series.
Yeah.
This might be the start of, maybe I should call it the new Rom.
Next, Jadzia goes to Odo's quarters to confront Curzon. Curzon says he's been oozing around the room. He's surprised how liberating it feels to be in a liquid state. Jadzia says she wants her memories back. She says this is her life he's living, and she earned the right to it. She reminds him she was the only person readmitted to the initiate program after being washed out. He manipulatively says, the only reason you got back in was because I felt sorry for you. When she disagrees, he says, don't you use that tone of voice with me, little girl. He's such a giant jerk. When she says she won't be intimidated and she's not a little girl anymore, he sighs and says, I suppose you're not. And then he calls her beautiful a bunch of times and he touches her face. And Dax asks if he's in love with her. He says at first he thought it was just an old man's passing infatuation. He always had an eye for the ladies. But as they spent more time together, he realized it was something deeper. And he was hard on her because he didn't want her to know the truth. Then later, he said he realized he robbed her of something she wanted her whole life, and he felt so guilty he nearly retired from the Symbiosis Commission.
Notice the nearly.
So he was grateful when she reapplied because it let him off the hook. So he thinks now that she knows the true story, it's best for him to stay in Odo. Plus, he still loves her. She says there's no shame in it, and he says yes there is, and if we rejoin, you'll feel it too. She says, no, I love you too, and you're a part of me. This way, Jadzia and Curzon can be together through Dax.
She has a psychotic murderer as part of her personalities, and he's worried about shame. This is the biggest excuse ever coming from Curzon.
Well, this is what happens with really grotesque people when they get caught in something. They just go into shame and they think that shame is the worst thing that's ever happened. But you know what? That's not the worst thing that ever happened. The worst thing that's ever happened is what you tried to do to that woman and you almost ruined her life. That's the worst thing. But oh, I'm sorry, you feel bad? Oh, how terrible. What a tragedy.
Well, I think Curzon's the victim here.
Yeah. Well, that is the story they're trying to paint.
Yeah. But it's all self-pity.
Oh, it's so pathetic.
Yeah.
And also, wasn't he like 100 when this was going on?
Oh,
And she was like 20. I mean, come on.
I don't remember the age, I'm afraid.
Because it had been 80 years since the thing with the Klingons.
I don't remember the timeline.
At the very least, he was 80-ish. He was 80 to 100, somewhere in there when he died. So this is gross. Now we go to Quark's bar, and Julian and Miles are playing darts. Sisko, Jake, and Kira are chatting at a table when Rom comes running in saying he's coming. Nobody seems to know what Rom is all on about, but in comes Nog in his new custom cadet uniform, and Rom introduces him as his son, Starfleet's future, and everyone claps. Well, everyone except Quark, of course.
That was awesome.
It was cute. Sisko and Jake come up to him and congratulate him in person. Sisko points out he jumped the gun a bit with the uniform, and Nog says he knows he hasn't earned the right to wear it yet, but he wore it for Rom, which was so cute.
It is wonderful how proud Rom is.
Oh, he really is.
And how supportive of Nog he is. Maybe this is the Sisko influence rubbing off onto Nog.
I hope so, because there certainly could be a trope where he resents Nog getting the life that maybe he thought he deserved. Something different, because they talk about him being a mechanical genius and how he probably could have done something in Starfleet or been on a starship.
Yeah, he could have been an engineer on a starship.
Exactly. So I'm glad they didn't fall into that trope where he would be resentful of his own kid. Instead, he's super proud of him, and it's very cute. And he has decided to take a stand, and he is going to support him and help him succeed. Maybe still he sees some success for himself in that, and that's great.
Rom's journey is not yet over.
Right. Well, Miles has a kind of funny look on his face, and Julian asks him what's the matter. And he says it just occurred to him that when Nog graduates from the academy, Miles will have to call him Sir. That is funny. I don't understand all that ranking stuff, but okay. I'm sure Miles knows what he's talking about. Well, then Nog leans on the bar and tells Quark he wants a root beer, something they serve at the academy on Earth. And Quark is like, this is the end of Ferengi civilization. That was my favorite part of the episode.
Like, that's a bad thing.
No, that was great. Root beer is going to bring down the Ferengi civilization.
Quark is also a master of the overdramatic.
Oh, he's so dramatic, yeah. Well, now Odo, just Odo, comes in and joins Jadzia, who is sitting by herself. He's come to apologize for his behavior, but Jadzia says she's glad that it happened because it forced her to face some things about herself that she'd not been able to face.
Yeah.
She also says she's been given a special gift. Now she knows what it feels like to be a changeling, and she had no idea how much joy it brings him. He's visibly touched by this statement and says he also never understood how much joy humanoids get from eating and drinking and playing Tongo all night. Then he says he doesn't know how Curzon ever managed to get any work done. He says he must have been a remarkable man. Yes, he is, Jadzia says. The end. The idea that somehow Curzon is such a paragon is just really disturbing and getting old. Anyway, do you have some overanalysis you would like to share with us?
Yes, I do have some overanalysis. Although my overanalysis 0.0 is I'm just going to avoid spending 20 minutes giving reasons why Curzon is the ultimate lowlife.
Why did...
But I will say, Odo points out, how did Curzon get anything done? I believe it's because Curzon got other people to do it, and he took the credit.
Sure. Well, that's a skill.
Like the treaty, and Kai Wynn turned up at the last minute, got all the credit while somebody else did all the work.
Oh.
That is Curzon. I would see that in his personality, in his behavior, and how he acts. I'd like Dax to find the person who is responsible for the actual Klingon treaties and things.
It's a good point. Although that's a skill, too. That's a skill, too, to be able to convince other people to do these things and then stand up and look like you're the hero.
I believe it's a trait of sociopaths.
It is so hard to understand why so many people supposedly look up to this drunk, womanizing, pompous slime ball. I mean, why would Jadzia, in particular, essentially someone who abused his power over her?
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, I hear you.
Moving on to the next point.
Yeah.
I think this Duran we saw was the pure version of himself. I think this was what Duran was really like. And what happened before, like how he became a candidate, etc., is because he could put on a face and he could put on an image. So I thought this whole piece was really interesting. The way this just really nasty individual came out. And Avery played it just so well.
Oh, yeah. definitely.
So I would worry about the filter between that personality and Jadzia today. How much of that would come out? We already brought up there were subconscious things such as Dax putting her hands behind her back,
right,
like her first host. What happens with Duran? Is there a possibility at some point Dax could just snap and murder someone because they insulted her or they were in her way or she was annoyed by them?
Yeah, but there really wasn't anything that they could do about it, right? I mean, they were just going to move Dax to a different host and try to cover it up again, but that didn't seem like that was working, so I don't think they have any choice. I guess the only thing they can hope is that because he was only in there for a short time, and there are, 7 other hosts, that maybe those personalities will continue to take ownership of the symbiont, instead of allowing that one to emerge as the dominant one. But I agree. It's a weird risk, yeah.
And I guess Dax having a strong personality could probably keep that under control, but you could still see it as a risk,
Well, yeah, they should consider, again, I say we need a ship's counselor or a station's counselor. We need somebody to be doing kind of some hypnosis, maybe to help keep those thoughts under control, or to see at least if some of those thoughts are starting to emerge. If she's having some violent tendencies or thoughts or something, if those things are starting to emerge, you would hope that someone would be talking to her. And maybe if we were more than just this sort of episodic 46-minute show, maybe that would be going on. Maybe we can assume that. Maybe somebody wrote a book about that. I don't know. I haven't read it. But I think she could definitely use some counseling to deal with this. And I actually think that it's really bad that they try to cover it up and they don't tell people about it, because this could help Trill society going forward to deal with something like this. This is why it's always a terrible idea to try to cover up bad things. You got to get that stuff out and you got to figure out ways to deal with it.
Right. What's the line? Sunlight disinfects.
Yeah.
My next point.
Yeah.
I noticed we did not see Lionel Luther as one of the hosts.
Well, I guess it wasn't long enough.
Oh, I feel like he was robbed.
Right? Yeah. No, I think it didn't have a long enough time to really set.
And I guess he was still alive, but wouldn't you still have those memories?
I don't know. I think they made a point that it just wasn't long enough.
Because at the end of that episode, she still had those.
She did. That's true. But I guess not enough to form a full person.
Okay, I'll accept that. That's a good answer.
That's some good headcanon. But it's a good question. Mm-hmm.
And I think my final point is, I kind of feel some sympathy for Odo here. Odo's always been so self-conscious and had such difficulty interacting with people. I could see how absolutely intoxicating it would probably be for him to now be the center of the party and actually enjoy it. Not just be a spectacle, but be the person, if you like, hosting the joviality and the fun, be the center of it. So I can understand it from Odo's perspective if this was something so unique, so new, and possibly something he's always wanted. It's
almost like when an introvert drinks for the first time, and the alcohol is kind of a lubricant to your fear of speaking. you start talking to people. It's almost like that. It's like he got this sort of lubricant of his introversion, and he liked it.
And then the follow-up to that is when the personality was removed, how embarrassed Odo would be knowing how private he is and how...
Yeah, I'm sure he didn't like that.
It would be such a sort of a shock to him, I guess, coming back to how he was and then contrasting that with what he'd become.
Yeah, right. But I imagine that being merged with Curzon, his ethics were challenged as well as part of it, or like tamped down.
Oh, right.
But I like that at the end, even though he was sort of corrupting Odo in a way, I like that Odo focused on the positive stuff that he felt about it, where he talked about how, gosh, I never understood why humans or humanoids enjoyed eating and drinking and playing games all night. It's like I never got it. And, this gave him a chance to understand that. So I think he could use this really. I don't know how much they do this, but I'm always so fascinated by the development of Odo, but he could really use this to understand humans more and to not scoff at little things that they seem to enjoy. He could really learn a lot from that brief moment in time where he knew what that felt like.
This is increasing the divide, the evolution between him and the founders.
Yes, it is. It really, really is. It's more than just him turning into a rock and knowing what a rock feels like. he actually did get feelings. And that's just different. Yeah, that's very interesting.
And I think that would be the huge difference between a very accomplished shapeshifter like Scary Founder Woman, as you call her, and Odo becoming the Curzon.
Yeah.
She could turn into a perfect copy of Curzon and maybe even emulate him, but would have no understanding of what was actually in there.
She wouldn't understand the joy. And probably the pain and other things too, but, they didn't focus on that at that last scene. He just talked about something good that he got from it. And on the opposite side, Dax talked about how she felt the joy of being a changeling.
Yes.
And, so they were very positive about that. So, they both took something that's an evolution for them as people, even though he's not a person, but you know what I mean? Emotionally. It's an emotional evolution that the founders, they don't believe in.
You saying that now, this almost gives Odo a partial support mechanism. There's somebody who actually Odo could talk to and understand what it's like to be a changeling. She knows something of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's huge. And if you were writing a book about these two people or a story just about these two people, this is a huge moment in the evolution of their relationship. It's huge.
She can understand it, and he has somebody he can relate to.
It's like when somebody says to you that they feel heard. That to me was what this was. They both heard each other in a way that really there was no other way for them to do that other than the way that it happened. It just seemed so emotionally impactful.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Awesome Star Trek. Okay, so that wraps up the overanalysis for me.
So you're not going to bring up the fact that this telepathic stuff didn't work on Odo before, and now it did in this episode?
Oh, well, I can talk about it if you want.
Well, I'm just surprised. I thought that was a thing that, because Dramatis Personae is your favorite episode from season 1, and in that episode, they made it pretty clear that that telepathic thing, whatever it was, didn't work on Odo. So why does it work here?
Because the Trill are slightly different.
Okay.
And it clearly needed to for the story aspect.
Well, I also wondered if it needed consent.
Oh.
For it to work on Odo, and he consented.
Right.
And he did not in Dramatis Personae. I was just surprised you didn't bring it up, because I thought it was a
interesting
thing.
Okay, here's a possible explanation. I looked at Dramatis Personae as that was an electronic or a technological system. They were using some kind of alien technology to do that transfer. Whereas this was a biological transfer, and the conduit was the Trill caretaker, one of the underground guys. So it was a little different, and maybe the biological approach could work with Odo. But Odo being receptive to it, that's also potentially another big possibility for why it works.
Yeah, and I like the description of it being like a joining, where these two things sort of came together. So it wasn't really like a normal imprint of the telepathic memories. It was something else. They were joined in some way. So yeah, it was just interesting. An interesting choice.
So now you're making me think about additional things.
Yeah.
The founders could basically join with Trill personalities then. They could become even more powerful by absorbing thousands of Trill lifetimes. Yeah,
they could. That's a little scary, honestly.
Plus, it would mean the Trill no longer need to keep those little worms swimming in the caves.
That's true. You don't need the worm.
Yeah, this is bad news for the symbionts. You can just join with
a founder. This is bad news for the symbionts. Oh, how funny.
Well, I think that really does wrap it up this time.
Okay. Well, if I go to women in the future, Jadzia really had to face her own insecurities about her place in the world, which, by the way, all these insecurities, they were all placed there by her own male hosts. Curzon first treated her like dirt so as not to admit that he was attracted to her. And then Duran, the psychopath, tells her she's worthless because he wants to take over. So all of this crap isn't really something that she needed to face about herself, but about men who treated her badly, either directly or indirectly.
Let's be fair.
Which is awful.
Duran treats everybody pretty badly.
Yeah, right, that's true. This is quite upsetting, but honestly, this is pretty realistic crap that women put up with all the time. Somehow, she just gets crapped on just for being a smart woman. And I think they accidentally portrayed something kind of realistic. But still, somehow, at the end, She tells Odo he doesn't need to apologize, which is such a woman thing. I mean, I disagree. A lot of people need to apologize to her. I think Odo was one of them, and at least he did. But I think Curzon needed to apologize to her as well. And the Symbiosis Commission needed to apologize to her. I think a lot of people probably needed to. But, she did that thing of saying, oh, no need to apologize. But that was really my only thing about women in the future there. Yes, we had a little Kira, we had a little Lita, this new character, but there really wasn't much development of them because they were portraying other characters in Dax's history. Yeah. But I just thought it was interesting. I feel like they kind of accidentally stumbled into something that was actually quite realistic.
Interesting. That's a fascinating take.
Yeah, so let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
I am so torn on this episode.
Sure.
It's an episode that isn't bad.
Yeah.
But it's an episode that I really didn't feel like it had a lot of heart. And that could be because to do this episode properly, it would almost have to be a two-parter. Because you'd want to see more of the characteristics of these personalities and how they work in the real world, as it were. And it was all smushed into one episode.
Yeah.
So I want to go thumbs up, but at the same time, I'm really kind of torn. I think I'm going to have to go neutral. Even though some aspects of it I really liked. I'm really talking myself around with this. I think I'm going to have to give it a thumbs up.
Oh, okay. Turn around.
Yes. My notes say neutral, but after us discussing it, I'm like, it was actually a pretty good episode.
That's just funny because I was going to say essentially the same thing, that I wrote neutral ? In my notes.
Yeah.
But the more we talked about it, the more I could pull sort of the positive things out of it, like how much I really liked the last conversation and how I felt like that was a real emotional journey.
Yeah.
And so I did like that. And of course, the scene with Duran, even though it was creepy and awful, I mean, that was strong. And the acting, of course, was great by Avery Brooks in that moment. So I did like that.
I feel Avery missed an opportunity for horror or playing villains.
Oh, yeah. He would have been a good villain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I'm doing the same thing. I originally thought maybe neutral, but the more we talked about it, the more I actually liked it and the more I think I'm actually going to take from that story.
Yeah.
There were a lot of throwaway things. All of the other characters were essentially throwaways. Even the silly conversation about why she keeps her hands behind her back. The only thing that maybe was useful there was to let us know that there are callbacks to things that you maybe don't know, but they're somehow affecting your behavior. Yeah. So it kind of gave us that. But even the little thing with Quark, that scene, you didn't really get anything from it. You didn't really get anything from the Lita scene or Miles or Julian. It was all to get us to a little quick thing with Duran to help undermine her confidence in herself. And then the big story was Curzon. I do feel like you're right. That was something that could have played out over an episode entirely. So, they could have split this into two. Yeah. There are many times where we think that, gosh, this should have been a two-parter. They should have done more with this story.
Right, because I think you could have made a classic Star Trek episode balancing humor with a very serious story. And you could have played the humor up more.
Yeah. Oh, totally. You could have played a lot of humor up with some of the earlier lives or the earlier hosts. Yeah. And I also really liked Rom standing up for Nog. And I liked Nog passing his tests and now getting into the prep program or whatever that's called. And I'm always going to be happy when Quark loses. So I'm going to give it a thumbs up.
The other thing in this episode is what's happening with Nog is you're seeing Nog setting out on this path that is literally the opposite of Quark's lifestyle.
Definitely. I think they gave that hint when he ordered the root beer. And that was like the end of the world for Quark. So I hope so. I think that would be a real positive. Because I've been complaining about Nog from the beginning and that he should be impacted by these other people around him and seeing better ways to live. So good. Hopefully that's true.
And it's also such a huge Star Trek thing.
For Nog to evolve. Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for season 3, episode 25. Come back next week for episode 26. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at ReBingeIT. Also, check us out on TalkThroughMedia.com. You can listen to our other podcasts there. In particular, the Star Trek Lower Decks podcast is going on now, so please give that a listen. And you can follow us on Instagram at ReBingeIT.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.